Hello everybody and welcome to another video. I got rank 60 yesterday and it was awesome, and I did lots of slash ranks and stomped people with my new finisher, tried out some of the new crafting, and now my motivation to PvP has like tanked immensely. So I think it might be time for another phase change for me, where I start playing like another element of Guild Wars 2 again for a while. Maybe, I don't know, PvP might keep me hooked for a bit, but I'm getting a little bit tired of it, I guess, and hitting 60 took quite a while, so I'm pretty happy with that now. But yeah, so that also means I'm sat here thinking maybe I should actually produce some videos. Let's have a look at questions and answers for today. We've got a fair few questions here. So the first one comes from Declan Goodsell, who says, "Hey WP, I noticed that one of your chat tabs is called Also Lonely. Why is this and what do you use it for?" Basically, I always used to just have the default tabs. I'd have regular and combat. I think that's what comes default with the game. And I never really messed about with those settings. I knew that they were there. For those that don't know, there's like specific stuff you can set up in those tabs. Loads of different checkboxes you can turn on, whether you want to have emotes shown, whether they're on or off, whether you want to have map chat shown, whether you want local chat, and even like really obscure things like having combat and game message information appearing in certain tabs. I suppose if I really sat down for a while, I could make quite an elaborate system where I have all these different tabs going on, where my whispers only come in on one tab and so forth, but I've never really fiddled about with it. However, a while ago now, I was doing something with Matt Visual and I realised he had a tab called Lonely, where basically he just turned everything off. And what this meant was he could play Guild Wars 2, appear online, but he could still record videos and nothing would appear like down in the chat box. You see a lot of people, for example, on Twitch who stream Guild Wars 2, they have like this big image, like sometimes I'll use a black bar or something just to cover up chat so that they can type away while recording, or, you know, people don't get necessarily distracted. But Matt had this cool little tab set up just called Lonely, and that's what he'd named it, Lonely, because nobody could talk to him. So I got the idea and then I made one of my own and I called it Also Lonely. And yeah, that's sort of the most I've ever experimented with that particular feature of Guild Wars 2, but it's a cool one, and maybe me mentioning this weird story to you all reminds you, hey, there's that, and you can go do some cool stuff. There's some other weird things as well with like the map. I'd love to play the game at some point, because there's an option you can do with the mini-map in the bottom corner where either it is always oriented in the same position, so like if you press M and you see the world map, north is at the top of the map, south is at the bottom, and you can have it by default. I believe the map is always oriented to mimic that. The mini-map this is, but you can also do it so that it rotates as you turn your characters, and I kind of want to play with that too. I want to like, I want to play Guild Wars 2 again through the whole leveling period, but I want to do it in like a unique way that's kind of like a game within a game, kind of like how I did with Guild Wars 1, where I turned loads of the UI off, and it was this mind-blowing experience where you realise you focus on loads of different stuff within the environment rather than the UI. I want to do that for Guild Wars 2, but it's a little bit harder, and I'm thinking maybe that map thing might be some small tweak to it. The other option is actually, because of the APIs, you could in theory create a program that allows you to turn off your entire UI in Guild Wars 2, and then you bring just certain elements of that back through third-party stuff. Like, you guys might not everyone knows about this, but there's a very useful application for this game called I believe it's just called Guild Wars 2 Stuff. But basically it's an overlay, it's a dynamic event overlay that helps you if you want to farm at end game and get all the world bosses. And basically what it does is it pulls information from Guild Wars 2 servers, and then if you play the game in windowed full screen, it puts like another mini window in front of your game client that shows you which bosses are up when and where. And there's other versions of this. There's one that shows you all the dynamic events that are currently active in your map. And what you can do is drag this mini little window over your mini-map in-game, and all of a sudden you've got a mini-map still, but this is a new mini-map that shows all dynamic event locations. And like, that's cool stuff. I'd love, if I had the talent for it, I'd love to have some kind of app like that allowed you to turn off all the UI in Guild Wars 2, absolutely everything, so it gets rid of all those ugly black borders all around the screen, everything. It all looks beautiful and clean and clear and crisp, and then you bring back in just very minor elements that are like resized. It'd sort of be like a ghetto way of bringing back the UI customization we used to have in the first game, but I'm not sure how viable it is. I don't know whether you could create an app that would show you your skill cooldowns and stuff. So, but yeah, anyway, I don't know how I talked myself onto that topic, but yeah, there's stuff you can do with the chat, I guess, and I've got a tab called Also Lonely. Kirka87 says, "Hey WP, this is more of a simple question as opposed to the normal ones you get. What's your favourite map in Guild Wars 2? I'm personally stuck between Malkor's Leap, Straits of Devastation, and Lornar's Pass. It's interesting to me that you have two different ore maps. I don't know about ore, man. I had a lot of very vivid images of what I thought ore was going to look like before the game came out, and I can't help but be a little bit disappointed. It's all sort of the same paintbrush that's just covered it all. There are, you know, fleeting glimpses of beautiful stuff in ore, but it sort of depresses me a bit. It really does. Like, and I guess it's meant to depress you on some superficial level, you know, it's supposed to be a depressing place to be around, but also I feel like there's a lot of majesty and magic and stuff that ore just never captured to me. I talked in yesterday's video about how Divinity's Reach still captures a lot of magic and excitement from me. Walking through that little tunnelway with the aquarium around you, looking up at the giant friggin' observatory in the center of the gardens, going to that like tent thing where they originally were going to have a mini game, like that Clasham night thing that never ended up opening up. That all fills me with a sense of magic and exploration and a desire to, you know, play an RPG. Or like never does that for me, ever. It's got a couple of really good dynamic event chains. I hold Lissa in the highest regard of all dynamic event chains and metas in the game. I think the Lissa chain is awesome. Implementation wise, it's got a few things off about it, but just the way it works in concept is so cool. And Balthazar's cool, again, mostly because of implementation there rather than by it being kind of unique. But I think Ore's got that, but physically, the maps don't really do it for me. I'm gonna say probably my favorite map is either Brisbane, because I love kind of the rocky, craggy style of a lot of the areas there, especially where it mixes in with some of the more jungly areas, and also I like a lot of the dynamic events that go in Brisbane. Or Lornar's Pass is great as well. You mentioned Lornar's Pass. I think one of the most scenic and tranquil areas in the game is south of Lornar's Pass, where it plays all those beautiful bird noises that you never really hear anywhere else, and you just sort of get to look out across the timber lakes, and you see all the big fern trees and the beautiful glistening water off in the distance. The south of Lornar's Pass is beautiful. But I think maybe the winner for me is going to be Mount Maelstrom. I love Mount Maelstrom. I've got it. I think it works really well thematically as a map. You guys might not have noticed, but in Mount Maelstrom, like, everything's separated into fours, and there's like this idea that there's 4 elements, and you've even got the jumping puzzle that they added later that you could access, and then had 4 elements that you had to sort of go around and get, and there were 4 different entrances through these 4 different enemies. And if you look at the way that the map is laid out, you've got like a quarter of it's kind of watery, you've got a quarter of it that's all kind of toxic, it's got the giant Asura base, you've got a quarter that's fire, and it's got the volcano there, and then you've got like a quarter that's very jungly and ancient ruins. It's beautiful, it's amazing. Like, I really enjoy it. I also really enjoy the underwater areas there. I like a lot of the dynamic events that are there. I played Azuric on my channel recently. That map has always reminded me of Azuric, like the underwater pipes and the big landscapes and environments. I love that map. I think it's going to have to be Mount Maelstrom. I think that place is so cool. So the next question comes from Pavo Ladiehu. Not said that right at all. Who says, "Hey WP, I noticed the mysterious probes around Tyria are beating the ground, making loud noises. Scarlet trying to attract destroyers to come above ground, maybe? Your opinion?" I love how this Primordus thing has just caught fire. Like, everyone in the community is like, this is definitely to do with Primordus. All the hints are there, all the signs are there. It's absolutely awesome, and I think this is an interesting idea too. I think another bit of sort of rampant speculation as well that's almost becoming sort of a given to most people is that these probes have got something to do with the ley lines. Like, even when the mysterious probes were originally added, there are already loads of people saying, oh, hey, look, these could be to do with the ley lines that are beneath Tyria, that were sort of there in lore and mentioned in like interviews and hinted at with that big globe in the Chantry of Secrets, but never like properly talked about or a part of the story until now, in theory, if this is to do with the ley lines. So I think that's a really interesting idea too, that these probes aren't necessarily trying to attract destroyers or have anything to do with Primordus, but because it's got something to do with the ley lines. And I think maybe both things could be true as well, you know. Maybe Primordus was the very first... Okay, here's what we know about the lore, alright? Let me take a step back. There are ley lines of magic beneath Tyria that swell and swell and swell, and then when they become too great, the Elder Dragons rise and they thirst for magic, and they eat it all back up again, basically. Leave the world in ruin, and then they fall asleep again. Now look at the Elder Dragons that we know of. The very first Elder Dragon to wake up was Primordus. Primordus, the dragon that exists largely deep underground. Maybe that's not a coincidence. Maybe, and I would love this to be true, that was something that they'd always thought about. They always had this idea of the ley lines, and now it makes sense that the Elder Dragon that lives underground, has closest proximity, knows soonest when these ley lines are getting to a ripe point. He's the one that wakes up first. And maybe I've always liked this idea too. Maybe therefore that could hint at him being like one of the strongest Elder Dragons. I've always been quite compelled by the idea that he'd be like the last one we kill because he was the first one to wake up. But you know, maybe this could be Scarlet doing something with the ley lines to taunt or aggravate or do something with Primordus. Maybe she's even trying to bring Primordus like on side or something. You know, the allegiances of the Elder Dragons has always been an interesting topic. I think I've got a question about it soon. With the Deep Sea Dragon, I've always been kind of interested in the Deep Sea Dragon being potentially like a good dragon. So maybe this is what the Thumpers are doing. They're not just trying to draw destroyers, but they're trying to interact with Primordus in some way. And maybe this will all therefore tie into some big thing where the Tengu tell us that they've been getting attacked loads, and we come into some big thing against Primordus. I think Primordus would be a smart place to go with a living story, because there are so many jaded Guild Wars 1 players who sort of have a little bit more of a connection with that particular dragon, and so if they did this, then maybe it would appeal to their senses, but who knows. There are a lot of theories, and I've got to say this whole destroyer thing is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it makes sense too, so I'll have to see where it goes. Rox Erioix says, "Hey WP, will you be back to the race origin videos?" Absolutely, I think I will. I think it's a bit of a shame that Guild Wars 2 Mysteries hasn't really come out for quite a while, and we were in the middle of doing the race origin videos, which I think are all pretty interesting. At one point when I was concepting like those race origin videos out, I was actually going to do just the first video alone, and then all the other races were going to be paired up. But the more you look into those races, the more interesting stuff you can see and mysteries there are. So absolutely I would like to continue with that. I'm thinking maybe I'll do the Norn next, just because of the connections with the Coden and so forth. But yeah, I'll get on those, and then we'll look at some other cool mysteries that we can do for Guild Wars 2. I also kind of want to do some Living Story recaps again pretty soon, given the trailer that ArenaNet recently released. So the Deep Sea Dragon question is coming up. Sai Zaro says, "Hi, I got a question for you about Guild Wars lore. While I was talking to my friend about Lagos, I noticed a line on the wiki that they have recently appeared in Tyria after fleeing unknown horrors in their homelands. And that reminds me of the underwater dragon. I think that's what it's called. What do you think? Could it be related to each other? Is that dragon responsible for those horrors?" I think very likely the answer is yes. The Deep Sea Dragon is sort of one of two hyper-mysterious dragons that are out there right now. Okay, we know that the Deep Sea Dragon exists, and ArenaNet were quite cool about it, because they said, yes, this thing exists, but we're not going to tell you anything else. It's there, and this word horror as well, like, is used quite a lot. I really identify with the idea of terrifying things beneath the sea. There'll be a link in the description, actually. This is what I'm going to do. There'll be a link in the description on this video to an image of the depths of the Mariana Trench, okay? And it's like to scale. Basically, the size of a human is 1 pixel, and then it goes down and down and down and down and down. And you can see how vast the oceans are. And what a lot of people don't realize as well is that the Mariana Trench is only the deepest mapped area of the oceans, and we've mapped barely anything of this planet's oceans. It's pretty crazy, okay? And it's terrifying, and I really, really like the idea of, you know, pre-industrial societies, fantasy worlds like we see Tyria in, with like their lack of knowledge also of the deep sea, of, you know, the tales of voyages that go out in the oceans and never return, and, you know, real fear of these big deep sea monsters, and that actually being a reality, that there's this terrifying, horrific dragon under the water. I think out of all dragons, as long as the Deep Sea Dragon remains mysterious, it is the most scary dragon and the most scary thing that they can do, and I really like that idea of fear. It's very, very cool. So it's one of these really, really interesting dragons that we don't know anything about, except that it's forced many races out of their original homelands, and this is why we interact with many of the waterborne races that we see in Guild Wars 2. I believe really early on as well, there was a little bit of lore about, like, tentacles, was it? Or weird monsters and abominations and things coming out of the water that were supposed to have been spawns of the Deep Sea Dragon. But, like, I believe the understanding of the people of Tyria, it's a bit of a weird one. In lore, the people in Tyria don't necessarily know that this dragon even exists. They don't know about the Deep Sea Dragon. There's hints that the Inquest know about it, because if you look outside the Crucible of Eternity, they've got that blue room, and they're talking about a specimen that they found, but it was too large, and so forth. But by and large, many people in Tyria don't even know about this dragon. So we're in a weird place where we, the audience, know, but the people in Terraria don't, and there's just a lot of really cool things that they can play with there. The question is, I guess, to sum up my tirade of information here, when are they going to go with it? Do you think that they're going to return us to the Elder Dragon soon in the living story? Something to do with these thumpers, and then would it be the deep sea dragon? I mean, is this almost sort of like the opposite of the fiery underground dragon, and now we're talking about the deep... It seems like a really, really long way off, you know? And I mentioned at the start as well, as I began to answer this question, it's one of two hyper mysterious dragons. The other one, of course, about the supposed existence of Mordramoth, this mysterious jungle dragon. So like they've got these two very mysterious dragons. When will they ever be addressed? Like it's a coin toss, you know. It could be very soon. It could be years and years and years away. I think, realistically speaking, the deep sea dragon we're not going to see for a while, because that's going to entail some kind of underwater stuff. And again, this is another thing that seems very low on ArenaNet's list of priorities, actually making underwater combat fun and introducing fun underwater areas. Maybe they just gave up with that at this point. They have cool concepts, and in theory it should have worked, but the actual implementation of the skills has just kind of rushed, I guess, somewhere, and they've not gone back to it. So I doubt we'll see the deep sea dragon. But yeah, it is definitely responsible for these horrors, and whatever those horrors are, they've overtaken the Largos' homeland. To end up this Q&A as well, one slightly off-topic question, I guess. What did you get for Christmas? WP says, iBiotics. He says, I got socks and shit. Dude, I got socks for Christmas, and I was super happy with them. I don't know, like, there's an age, man. You get to it, and you're like... Damn, socks, thank you. Oh, these feel so good on my feet. You know, you wake up the next day, you have a shower, you dry yourself off, you open up that drawer, you get your underwear, and then you look at your socks, and you're like, oh, these are so soft. Especially if they've been, like, near a radiator or something. Oh, beautiful. On a winter's morning, greatest thing in the world. So, yeah, I got socks, actually. I genuinely did get socks. I got a bunch of other stuff, too, but, like, it's mostly small things that I've actually really thoroughly enjoyed when I didn't think I would. Like, for example, I got a candle, which many people find immensely funny, but I really, really liked, so... Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Please feel free to leave any questions you have in the comment section below. I've just started going through my PMs again. Loads of them to get through. YouTube's been really bad. It keeps hiding further and further and further away where your inbox is on YouTube. It used to be right there on the front page, and it would show me exactly how many messages I had. Now it's like super buried and really difficult to get to. But I'm going through those also. That means I have probably plenty of questions too. But please do leave them in the comment section below. We should be coming up to a patch pretty soon here. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Hope you have a great evening, and I will see you next time.